Hello everyone. So today we're going to go deep and talk about this UFO subject we all love on Analyzing Today's UFO Clips, episode 46. Okay, so as many of you guys know, I like to share with you guys things that I find interesting that I find on the internet, and today we're going to run through a few things that I found this past month, which I think you guys will enjoy. And let's see if we can start a conversation in those comments down below. Let's start off with a clip that surfaced while I was making this video, and it comes to us from Tom DeLonge's IG account. There isn't much info on this as of right now, and it's super short, so let's go ahead and watch it a few times in a row. Now again, I have no info on this clip as of right now, and I'm not sure if Tom is just trolling us or if he actually decided to leak a clip from his own personal stash. But for now, let's go ahead and zoom in and stabilize this shot. So I've went ahead and slowed down this clip, and what do you guys see here? I went back and forth with my opinion on what this shape is on this object, because sometimes it looks like a disc and other times it looks kind of like a tic-tac. Like in frames like these where you can see little characteristics which would suggest that maybe there's a slight cap at the top and possibly one at the bottom, and that maybe we're seeing this shape because we're looking at this disc from a certain perspective. But then in other instances it looks very much like a tic-tac shape. So what do you guys think? And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there seems to be a little bit of a wobble to this object as it hovers there. Something else that I find consistent about this clip to other clips is that this object has that same kind of organic movement to it. Remember this other clip that we featured a while back? It's got that same characteristic I'm talking about. The way it kind of just hovers there, then all of a sudden decides to take off. Its movement along the tree line seems like it's not so much controlled by thrusters, but more like the ship is alive itself. But I'll go back and tell you that I'm not sure if this clip is actually real. Maybe Tom just found this clip and decided to use it to convey his point. Not really sure. And possibly by now we already know the answer. But why don't you guys tell me what you think about this in the comments down below. Next, let's look at this clip.
Bro, what the fuck is that? Like, look, there's a plane. There's a plane because we have an airport here. Like, to the left, to the right. To the right of me. What is that? What the fuck is that?
I ran across this and I thought I'd share it with you because sometimes we find a clip on the internet and we have to really think about what we're looking at. A disc over a city? Very clearly a UFO. But is it really an intergalactic ship? Wouldn't you think that if this was actually a real UFO sighting, it'd be huge global news? Well, it would be, but unfortunately, no, this is not real. What we're looking at is actually a balloon of sorts. Some people call it a paper balloon. And that makes a lot more sense. So yeah, I thought I'd share it with you just in case you run across it and wonder if it's real. Now, just quickly, I wanted to touch on this photo which recently resurfaced of the Calvine UFO case. And there's a lot to say about this case. I'll put some links in the description down below so you can get familiar with all the details of the case. But the overall talks about it is that this object seen in this picture is actually a craft out of a black project, and something else that's interesting is that the courts decided to hold back the information about this case till the year 2072. 2072, can you believe that? But again, that's for another deep dive. All I really wanted to say about this craft was to comment on its shape, because it reminded me a lot of the obelisk craft that Jonathan Reed saw in his famous UFO case. I don't know what you guys think about that story, but it's certainly a classic from way back in the day. And I'm certainly not going to say that I believe or even disbelieve Mr. Reed, but he does have some pretty cool footage and pictures, but then again, some really questionable stuff. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this Jonathan Reed case. Let me know what you think about his case in the comments down below, would you? Okay, so now, I know some of you guys like the more vintage UFO reports, so let's go ahead and do some of those. So next is something that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen, but I invite you to watch again under the new perspective of these modern days. I'd like you to clear your mind and forget all the controversy around Mr. Gordon Cooper. And then remember that these days, the Navy and the government have officially opened up more about the possible existence of UFOs. And then you gotta think to yourself, what does that do to these past stories? If Commander Fravor talks openly about the Tic Tac and many of us believe him, then why not listen again to some of astronaut Gordon Cooper's interviews? Listen to what he says, and if he's as credible as Fravor, then you gotta think about what all of this means. Let's watch.
You said you saw literally hundreds of unidentifiable flying objects.
Yes, they were flying quite high. How high we couldn't tell because we couldn't get anywhere near their altitude. But they were either very large craft way up or smaller craft still well above what we could get to.
For a day and a half, all of this happened. But then no one wanted to talk about it.
Well, we sent a report forward on it, and the answer that finally came back months later was they were probably high-flying seed pods, which didn't sound very logical.
While supervising flight testing in Edwards Air Force Base, his military camera crew actually filmed an unidentified saucer-shaped object landing near the site.
As they were sitting there filming, a little saucer came from, I say little saucer, it was a saucer, came flying over their heads, put down 3 little landing gear and landed right out on the dry lake bed. And they picked up their cameras and started over toward it, filming as they went. And when they got in fairly close to it, it lifted up, put the gear back in the wheel wells, tipped up, and took off at a great rate of speed. And so they came into my office and told me what had happened, and I sent them over to develop the film. And then had to go through all the proper regulations of reporting this, and we wound up having to send the film forward to Washington in the base jet airplane, and I don't know whether anyone's ever seen it since.
Now, the vehicle that you just described, how similar was it to the very first sighting that you had back in 1951?
Quite similar. It was basically the same plan-form vehicle. They were double saucer, lenticular. But if you're going to be going in and out of atmospheres like Earth or other places might have, you certainly need a little more aerodynamic type of vehicle. And the saucer has the capability of going through the air at tremendous rates of speed and handling the bow and trailing wave without making shock waves. So it can be very silent while traveling at big rates of speed through the atmosphere. A friend of mine who was a captain on a major airline at night was flying along, noticed this. Suddenly a big glow came off his left wing, and he looked out and this big saucer was sitting right off their wing. And so he turned slide toward it and it moved away, and turned back and it moved back in position, and turned to his co-pilot and said, do you see what I see? And he said, oh God, yeah, I do. And it trailed along with him for quite a period of time, then tipped up, climbed very steeply away. Was on Jim McDivitt's Gemini 7 mission, where they saw this glint of something metallic off in the distance, and he reported, and nobody had it listed on the ground, so he tried getting a picture of it, but the sun, unfortunately, was glinting off of it so bright, all you got is just a glint. There was no detail on what it was, but never any further sighting at all on it. Well, the letter to the UN was in conjunction with a meeting that I had with Kurt Waldheim and the Security Council of the UN, to try to encourage the UN to establish a committee to start comparing notes and data and information, and to really look into all of this from an unbiased, neutral point of view.
Here's a quote from your letter. I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets and are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth. And are you saying that's exactly why governments have been trying to keep this information private, because of that obvious advancement?
Very possibly, right.
So what does it mean? What I take away from this is that people within the government and military have encountered this phenomenon now for a very long time, and I'm willing to bet that around 99% of these people don't know exactly what they're dealing with. I think that after all these years, probably 1% or maybe even less than 1% of officials have the full story and have advanced with this technology, probably passing it on to private sectors, and that's why I think former director of Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, said, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." It's also rumored that before he died, he confirmed there are 2 types of UFOs, the ones we build and the ones they build. We learned from both crash retrievals and actual hand-me-downs. My goodness. I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. But for now, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so next, I'm sure you've heard of the Zimbabwe Elementary School sighting, and you've probably heard of the Ariel School sighting as well. But have you heard about this case coming from Cuba, where again, a bunch of school kids saw something completely incredible? Let's take a look.
Existen lugares por los que los ovnis parecen manifestar cierta preferencia para repetir sus visitas. Lo ocurrido en una escuela de matanzas nos hace sospechar que este lugar pudiera ser uno de ellos.
Era de septiembre de 1996, alrededor de la medianoche estábamos aquí, Susana, Yanesi y yo acostados en nuestra cama. Ellas dos tenían su cabeza allá en la almohada y yo estaba acostado para acá, mirando las estrellas. Y entonces había mucha calma, mucha tranquilidad, todo el mundo estaba dormido en silencio. De pronto yo siento mucho aire, vino un aire, mucho aire, se iluminó toda esta hilera aquí, se iluminó. Y sentimos un ruido como un zumbido. Y yo observo para arriba para ver de dónde venía la luz y el sonido. Y veo un objeto de forma alargada, con luces alrededor intermitentes, blancas y rojas, que pasaba por aquí, pero muy escaso. No podía haber sido ni un avión, ni un helicóptero, porque no podía haber pasado por ahí y tan despacio. Yo nunca había visto un avión y tan despacio, era muy escaso, pasando por aquí. Se veía delgada la parte más redonda, con luces alrededor, roja, blanca y azul, y en medio era plateado. Entonces, yo me quedé mirando, después yo digo, y se metió por la... Al día siguiente, por la noche, un grupo de niñas fueron a hacer baño. Y en ese instante sintieron ese viento y ese ruido y se asomaron por la ventana del baño para ver si eran eso. Entonces, una de las que lo vio, dijo, sí, es el ovni que vimos ayer. Y empezaron a gritar y todas nosotros nos despertamos y fuimos para el baño. Y ahí empezamos a hablar de cómo que así mismo era, como nosotros habíamos visto en el día anterior, y vinimos y recogimos todas las cosas de la cama y nos fuimos para el baño a dormir. Y el viento volvía y cuando nosotros nos callábamos y no hablábamos, empezaba el ruido y el aire. Y cuando nosotros empezábamos a hablar, se sentía nada más que la voz de nosotros. Y volvían y se caían los pecheros, las sábanas y todo. Y teníamos mucho miedo. Y un helicóptero no era, porque eso no tenía ni aletas ni nada. Y el ruido de un helicóptero no se parecía en nada al del ovni, porque el ovni era como un zumbido. Y cuando se iluminó todos los bellos, todas las niñas se bajaron de la cama, que era más temprano, y corrieron todo el mundo para allá, para el baño, y empezamos a intercambiar ideas, tenías que lo había visto otros días, empezamos a relacionar ideas, cosas que concretaban ideas que había, y no sé, el ovni que yo había visto cuando era más pequeña, que era igual a él, y ahí nos quedamos dormidos. Bueno, cuando yo estaba en quinto grado, estaba en el baño de la recepción, allá adelante, y vinieron unos amiguitos míos y la que le corre el ovni. Eso fue cuando pasó por Cárdenas, que hubo el lío del ovni, pasado. Subí hasta aquí esta escalera de abajo, y aquí encima de la terraza, como flotando en el aire estaba este mismo juguete, ovalado, con las luces, era una luz blanca, muy grande, una roja y una blanca. Y aquí tenía una blanca de una blanca, resplandecían de luz blanca. Y subí las escaleras para acercarme mejor, pero lo vimos así. Y eso se convirtió en una luz y desapareció. Yo aquí trataré de dibujarle lo que yo vi más o menos como yo puedo apreciarlo. Era de esta manera. Y aquí tenía muchas luces. Este poco eran las luces, que eran blancas, rojas y blancas y rojas. Voy a dibujar el objeto de DeLonge que yo vi en su parte interior. Bueno, era redondo, con luces alrededor, en rojas, azules, blancas, y así se repetían los colores. En el medio era con unas raíces así como si fuera, y plateado. Y terminaba todo así.
I gotta tell you, when a child tells you something like this, you simply gotta stop for a moment and listen. Their description of the craft reminded me a lot of these photos, which have actually never been fully debunked. The circular lights with different colors, which really makes you think. Pretty incredible stuff. Now, let's watch a Stanton Friedman clip, because, well, why not? There are some pretty interesting photos in this clip, and one of them I think actually looks like DeLonge's craft we featured earlier. Let's take a look.
A major myth about UFOs is that only kooks, quacks, nuts, strange people believe in them or are interested in them or see them. That's absolute nonsense.
What do experts believe UFOs look like?
Typically, we're dealing with apparently round, symmetric, disc-shaped objects, definite size, shape, surface texture, bigger in diameter than they are in thickness, protuberances that might be landing gears or antenna, windows might be decorations too, we don't really know. Things with definite size, shape, surface texture. There are other reports of things that are cylindrical, long cigar-shaped objects. And if you look at the landing cases, and of course I'm most concerned with landing cases because then we have something to work with. These are cases, landing trace cases, where a UFO is seen on or near the ground, and after it leaves, one finds physical changes produced in the environment. If you look at those cases, and one researcher has collected more than 1,000 such cases from 55 countries, and they're similar, whether you're dealing with sightings in Australia, New Zealand, you got the same landing traces as in the United States, as in South Africa, as in Canada, England, France, all over the world. There aren't any laws of physics that stand in the way of flying saucers, either getting here from other star systems or performing here once they're here. Many people think that you can't get here from there. The fact of the matter is that there are published studies by reputable engineers and scientists in good technical journals showing that trips to nearby stars, and I don't worry about the distant ones, are feasible with reasonable round-trip time, shorter than a person's lifetime, without violating any of the laws of physics, and using staged fission or fusion propulsion systems, on both of which I have worked. Now, we physically tested fission nuclear propulsion systems when I was at Westinghouse. In 1967, we tested the NRX-A6, less than 3 feet in diameter, power level 1,100 million watts. That's roughly the same energy it takes to light this, or to provide the electricity for the city of Perth.
UFOs are here.
That last part about the small nuclear power source reminded me of when Lazar talked about that small energy source that the sport model possessed. But that is for another video. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this collection of things I found interesting this past month. And as always, this is Jesse, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys in the UFO community, and how we should all recognize that we live in an incredible era for humanity. And you know what? I think the best is yet to come, especially if it involves UFOs. Why? Well, because we love the UFOs. Till next time, guys.